which is
All right, everybody, we're back with the Fawn Pod. We got a special topic today. It has to do with Joe's drink deal. We'll get to that in just a second. This is Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. This is Cody back after a week off. Thanks for the host for doing a show without me. That was nice. And we got
it was
Justin.
very nice not having you there.
I'm sure it was. Your score probably benefited from it. I'll say
Ooh,
that. Maybe not, though. You guys got me intrigued enough to watch Superman at some point. So that was goal accomplished, I guess.
cool.
That's something I'll check out, which I heard it's like streaming already or something too. I don't know if you have to pay
I
for it
think
or
you
not,
can,
but
yeah, I think you can rent or buy it, but it's like $20 to $30.
it was if I understand it, it was a real quick turnaround because they wanted to get it out before Peacemaker. Is that why?
Oh, I
Maybe.
guess I didn't know that, but that would make sense because
It was something weird. Like they were like, we're rushing it to make it available
yeah,
because X and Y
Peacemaker
or
just
something.
premiered like a couple days ago, this new season, so that would make sense, I guess.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, anyway, welcome to the podcast. We're going to talk about one of, if not one of the top couple famous cryptids here tonight, the Loch Ness Monster. Dun dun dun. But before we get to that, let's see what these guys have been up to since their last time hosting last week. So, who wants to kick off first?
I guess I can go. A lot of my time since then has been spent actually delving into research for this because it was sort of not, I don't want to say a last minute decision, but it seemed kind of abrupt. And I was really kind of astounded we haven't covered Nessie before. So yeah, I've just been diving headfirst into this aquatic mystery. And aside from that, oh God, what have I been doing? I've been dealing with the world's worst planned renovations at work. That's been a lot of the rest of my time, where I swear no one actually planned any of this out, and no one actually knows what the next step is going to be at any given time. But it's been very loud.
What do you work for the
Uh,
government?
Hey,
May as well at this point.
Hmm.
But it's been really loud. There's probably dust in the air that no one should be breathing in.
Oh boy.
It's it's a mess. But somewhere in the midst of all of that, I found time to try to hack away a little bit more at my backlog before a bunch of games that we're looking forward to come out kind of all at once on the horizon. I started playing Doom: The Dark Ages just today, and I like it a lot more than Doom Eternal. It's not quite as fast paced. It's certainly not as acrobatic, and it seems like it's more of a power fantasy than Doom Eternal was, because it always felt like I was running out of ammo in Doom Eternal, and having to do just really unintuitive stuff to get that ammo back. So this one is a nice change of pace. I know it's kind of divisive, but I'm liking it so far. I got to pilot a giant Doom mech against other giant demons, and that was interesting. A little janky, but it worked. But yeah, so I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I am kind of tired, so I'll punt this over to Joe. What's been up on your end?
not a whole lot. Um, yeah, that's about it.
Womp womp.
No, I really haven't been up to anything too exciting. I did want to mention, I don't think I've mentioned this show before, but Alexis and I have been enjoying an Apple TV series called The Studio, which stars Seth Rogen and varying famous guest stars in every episode, it seems like. But the premise of the series is that he has been working in the movie industry for like 20 plus years, and he loves film and is like very passionate about trying to make, quality artful films. And he ends up ascending to the point where he is made the head of a movie studio, but the kind of, money and powers that be behind the studio keep insisting that they churn out movies and not films. So he wants to make, actual like art films, and they're pushing him to make like big budget blockbusters just to make money. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the tension of that struggle. Um, but it's also, I mean, Justin's kind of grumbling because it kind of hits you close to home. That seems to be the way Hollywood has been going for the past like 20 years or so.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's really funny show. I really like it because it's episodic. So every episode has its own kind of like, premise, beginning, middle, and end. So much as I appreciate that most TV shows these days seem to be serialized, it's kind of nice having something where you can just watch an episode here or there and get a complete story and not have to, have a cliffhanger and tune in next time. So that's a pretty fun show. And other than that, Alexis and I also recently watched a new documentary on Netflix about The Biggest Loser. And shockingly, everyone involved in that show is terrible, and it is probably something that should never have existed.
Oh boy.
But
Like the
that's about
contestants or the people behind the show?
no, the people running the show. Like,
Okay.
there's like this
Okay.
producer
Good.
they're interviewing, and like everything like every time they show something awful that happened to the contestant, this guy's like, "Oh, I didn't know anything about that. I swear to God, I
Is he
didn't know
Vince?
that was going on."
Is he Vince McMahon?
Kind of, like, honestly. And like, I mean, they also have interviews with one of the two like fitness coach people that was on the show, and he just seems like a scumbag. And I mean, it's kind of an interesting watch, but it's also just it does make you wonder how, because that show ran for like I think 17 seasons. And it's like
Whoa.
it's insane that it went on that long. Like, it's honestly crazy that nobody actually died. Like, with how extreme they were about everything, like honestly, it's just crazy how unhealthy the whole thing was. Like, it's
Wow.
shocking that nobody dropped dead during the course of it.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, and then one last quick thing, I did just today start replaying Hollow Knight. Um, Partly because I lost my save file, and but the long-awaited sequel, Silk Song, is finally coming out in less than 2 weeks. So
Woo.
wanted to kind of revisit the original. I probably won't actually beat it before then, but I wanted to at least throw myself back into that world a little bit and get refamiliarized with how that game at least plays. And it's been fun so far.
And what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a cocktail known as the Godfather. I think legend has it that it was like Marlon Brando's preferred beverage. It's Scotch and amaretto.
Mm.
Okay.
Um, the proportions, I've seen recipes calling for anywhere from like equal parts to like 2-to-1 Scotch to amaretto. I kind of prefer that ratio because equal parts tends to be too sweet. But
Hmm.
um, if you happen to have some Scotch whiskey and some amaretto in your house, it's pretty tasty.
Nice. On my end, I am also drinking a traditional Scottish beverage tonight. This is a electric blue raspberry hard cider, which I think goes back to the Highlands back around 1200 AD or something like that. I'm not positive. Actually, I'm really low on alcohol in my house, can you tell? But anyway,
Electric blue raspberries are the favorite food of Nessie.
I might
It's
have to
true.
find a 24-hour place when we get done tonight so I can have some booze for
I heard you
tomorrow.
can buy a pound of electric blue raspberries for about 350.
Tree Fitty. Let's see. Over on my end, most of my time, honestly, has been spent prepping for the next two podcast episodes we have coming up, of which we don't need to spoil perhaps just quite yet. But one is a listening one, and one's a watching thing. And so between the two, that's been a lot of my time, but I've enjoyed doing both of them a lot. So that's been really fun. And then on top of that, I guess I will just plug what I mentioned to you guys in the chat just before we logged on. They have the monthly AEW wrestling pay-per-view tomorrow. This is usually once a year they go someplace else. So they're in London tomorrow. They were in Scotland and England all week this week. So it's another one of these weird ones where the pay-per-view's on at like 10:30 in the morning start time here, and I think the main show starts at like noon start time here, and then goes till, probably 4 or 5, which is weird that it's not at night, but should be good. Looks like another stacked card they have for everybody to watch. Some great matches should happen at that. So excited for that. That's really about it here, I guess. Just kind of back to the school routine and doing all those things now. So, all right. Well, let's get to it, peoples. The Loch Ness Monster, which was first seen on South Park back in the year 2000. No, I'm joking. No, but let's get into this today. So, yeah, this is a weird one. Like Justin said, we've kind of hit a lot of these famous creatures in our podcast vault, but this is one we just apparently never got to. Um, but essentially, everybody kind of knows what this is. It's the Loch Ness Monster. So, just a little intro I have here, and you guys can add to this. I think I could tell from my research, at least 1933 is when they officially named this creature as the Loch Ness Monster. So it's coming up on its 100-year anniversary, I guess, in a little while here. This was from the Inverness Courier, or Courier, perhaps, where there were some people that saw it pretty famously in 1933. We'll talk about them later on, but that's kind of where the name first came from. And then in the 1940s, it kind of adapted the nickname Nessie after Loch Ness, which is the Scottish lake that it's in. Generally speaking, most of the traditional accounts have some kind of creature with a long neck, a large body, and possibly humps that rise above the water, depending on which shape you think this might be. Often
Lovely
described.
Disney lumps. What?
Yes, I think that's probably the answer to where those humps went. Yes. Plesiosaur-like, like an old dinosaur, I guess, is kind of the general shape they're talking about for this, but other reports sometimes describe it as even salamander or eel-shaped, and we'll talk about some of these options later on in the podcast here as well. And then probably, I don't know, AI is very confused on this if you ask it as a question. I just typed it in Google, but you know how there's like the automatic response that comes up now all the time. There's very conflicted answers to this, but I think it possibly, besides Bigfoot, Sasquatch, is maybe like one of the top two cryptids. Does sound like around the world, non-United States, Bigfoot is probably not as big as we think it actually is as a phenomenon, although there's, you know, other creatures like that around the world. Loch Ness Monster seems to be one that is fairly pervasive in public consciousness around the world as well. So I don't know where this lands. One result even said Chupacabra was ahead of it, I think, or something like that. And I was
What?
like, what?
Eh.
So anyway, yeah, so kind of just like intro stuff. I don't even know. Do you guys remember, just to kick this off, like where you were, how old you were, like when you heard about this first, or approximately? One of the documentaries I was listening to basically said if you're of a certain age, probably being like 40s, 50s now-ish, there was probably like a time period in your life where you would have went to like your elementary school library and like there would have been books about this. Actually, Justin, what were you saying earlier?
Oh God, yeah. So as is my habit, whenever we do a topic like this, I tend to go to the local library to see what books there are. And I think the most recent one I was able to find was from 1986. Um, the other one that they had that had any mention of Nessie at all was, I believe, from 1975.
Wow.
I mean, obviously, the internet has more recent accounts and material, but either they stopped really publishing stuff in the 80s,
Hmm.
or my library decided it wasn't worth picking up the more recent books. But yeah, which is interesting in and of itself, considering how famous the monster is. Um,
I
to
think
answer your go ahead. I'm sorry.
you should put in a complaint to some of those local librarians around your area.
Yeah.
I think spoilers. Well, not spoilers, but if for those who don't know, my wife is a librarian. She doesn't work at
Wait,
the.
what? I didn't mean that then. Just kidding.
And I think she does have a more recent children's book about Nessie,
Perfect.
like published within the last 5 years. But yeah, in terms of like adult literature, like actual books you'd find in the nonfiction shelf, I don't think much is being published these days.
And the author of that children's book is Justin Henry. And for some reason, the library ordered 450 copies of that book. I'm not saying it's an inside job, but let you draw your own conclusions there. How about you, Joe? You remember this one?
uh, no, I mean, honestly, I feel like this is one of those things that I have known about since I was like a very young child. Like, I obviously there had to have been, something that first introduced me to the concept, but it seems like something I've just kind of always been aware of. Like
Hmm.
nothing really stands out as, the moment I learned about Nessie. Um, I mean, it feels like it's just one of those. Like it would shock me if the Chupacabra is like more popular or better known than the Loch Ness Monster, just because it just seems like one of those things that like you're almost born with like knowledge of the legend of the Loch Ness Monster. So yeah, I definitely cannot pinpoint like a specific moment that I first learned of it.
Oh, yeah, I never did actually answer that question. I want to say I remember seeing like a Disney cartoon with Scrooge McDuck where he meets the Loch Ness monster at some point, but I haven't been able to like dig up anything about an episode or
Oh,
like a
wow.
feature about that. But I swear there's something in the back of my head where that is kind of what I remember most about my first exposure to the Loch Ness monster.
Loch Ness
That's
Monster with who did you say? Scooby-Doo?
Scrooge McDuck,
Scrooge McDuck. Okay.
which kind of makes sense when you think about it. But I'm not finding any like
Yeah.
pictures or anything. Otherwise, I vaguely remember being in like a doctor's office or like dentist's office or something when I was 6 or 7 or something like that, and there being like a magazine on the table with probably the most famous photo of quote unquote the Loch Ness monster on it in
Yeah.
some feature or another. I vaguely remember that early on too. So um so yeah, it was one of those two things that was my first exposure to it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first time, I don't have an exact memory of this, but I recall like my family was having a picnic on the side of this idyllic Scottish lake that we were at on vacation. No, yeah, mine probably was, I would have to imagine maybe like a book in an elementary library or something like that that I happened to come across. But yeah, kind of like Joe said, it just seems like it's been there forever, but there must have been some point in my life where I was like, ooh, Loch Ness Monster, this is cool. What's this all about? Probably very similar to Bigfoot, I'd imagine. I would think.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, my father watched, and still does, shows on these types of things like round the clock with his channels he has on satellite, and maybe he did back then as well, so it's possible, but I don't know if there were as many of them back in the 80s as there would be on now, which, you know, we joked about the Alien, what's the show called you were just talking about?
Oh God,
Alien.
Ancient Aliens.
Ancient Aliens, yeah,
Oh
that
yeah.
guy. And I saw there was an episode of on the Loch Ness Monster for that, and I was like, "Ooh, I really want to." And I turned it on for like 5 seconds, and the guy's like, "Let me introduce myself." And I was like, "I'm out. I'm done with this
I
one."
was
So,
joking when I suggested that as a thing. I had no idea they
yeah.
actually did an episode on it.
Oh yeah, it's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's on YouTube. You can watch it.
God damn
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
that was like actually a suggested video I came across too.
Oh
Spent by
man.
the huge advertising budget of Ancient Aliens themselves. All right. All
Ah.
right, let's get to the big show here. So, without further ado, here we go, guys. It's our top 10 appearances of the Loch Ness Monster in video games. So, I'll kick off. Number 10, I had Gran Turismo 5 appearance by the Loch Ness Monster over here. Number 9, Scribblenauts. You could type it in and it would pop up on the screen. So that was kind of an exciting one there, word-based game. Number 8, Tomb Raider: The Last Artifact. I think we all remember that pivotal scene in that game with the Loch Ness Monster. Number 7,
There was
Panorama
a there
Toe.
was
That
a
was a
Tomb
great
Raider
one.
game called The Last Artifact.
Wow, Joe, you're way behind on this stuff. Once Angelina Jolie was out, you just checked out, my friend. Number 6, way back to Sega, Top Gear for this one. Appearance of the Loch Ness Monster in the background. We remember that. Number 5, The Sims Vacation. Another classic one here. Number 4, Apex Legends on this one, where you can actually get little Nessie stuffies in the game. So that's kind of an interesting one. Little variation there. Number 3, Grand Theft Auto Online had a mission you could do with the Loch Ness Monster in the background as well. So kind of a fun one. Number 2, more recent one to our list, the actual game called Loch Ness, which is a co-op online horror game, possibly in the spirit of like the Friday the 13th Halloween style games. And number 1 on my list, only because you can get it as a DLC downloadable breedable pack. My number 1 is Zoo Tycoon, where you could actually get the enclosure with the Loch Ness Monster. So, who wants to go next? Do anybody else have a list on that, or?
I just have South Park: The Fractured But Whole.
Ooh, good one. good one. Wasn't that on sale? How much did you pay for that?
About 350.
Yeah, it's right.
uh,
Oh, goodness.
just in the background while you were doing that, I do see Nessie was a demon in one of the Shin Megami Tensei games that never got translated into English.
Nice.
So I'll toss that one out there. Sure, why not?
Nice. Not on my list, but most surprising appearance apparently is in a Mega Man game as well, which I was
What?
surprised by. So you didn't find the secret hidden boss? It's right after Radiance. All right.
Oh
All right,
man.
all right, all right, all right. Joey, joking. We're joking. We're joking. Let's get into the actual Loch Ness Monster. Here we go. We got just first this concept was kind of interesting to me, and I have two theories on this myself, but I'm intrigued to hear what you guys would say. So, in the early age of sailing, if you want to call it that, we come across like these countless depictions, stories, legends of sea creatures, lakes, rivers, sometimes seas, oceans. And then even in the last 200 years, where that's maybe not even the primary method of transportation anymore, we still have all these famous sea creatures out there that endure, just like the Loch Ness Monster. I just wrote a couple down here. Like here in the United States, we have Champ in Lake Champlain in New York, Ogopogo in Lake Okanagan in BC, British Columbia, Canada, Okole Mbembe in the Congo River Basin. And then I just put one more down here, a different part, Lake Van Monster in Lake Van, Turkey. And there's a lot of these out there. You can kind of go all over the place and find these. But my question for you guys is, why do you think there are so many of these legends that exist regarding water in these large creatures that supposedly inhabit that water? I have two theories, but I'm intrigued what you guys think about this. Unless you say they're all real, and that's the end of that. So,
Well, as you put it, in the early days of sailing, um, ocean voyages or even like voyages across large lakes were dangerous. They were very perilous. Ships would sink in bad weather or by colliding with debris or obstructions that they couldn't see, or any number of reasons. Or sometimes people didn't know. Um, so they had to come up with some explanation for why people kept going missing, why these ships kept sinking, and there's a lot of water out there, a lot of area. If you extend into three dimensions, a lot of volume.
yeah.
So yeah, monsters. Here be dragons. I mean, that's how things were. Unknown areas were filled in on maps, and I think that included sea serpents. Um, so yeah, it was a way to explain tragedies, disappearances, and things that people didn't know. And even today, we've mapped more of space than we have of the ocean. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's uh, it's just an explanation for things that people didn't know how to parse.
I agree. Well, I mean, I think I do think that is it to a large extent. I think there are other, possible explanations as well, such as there are a huge variety of large creatures that do live in the ocean and in various bodies of water, whales and sharks and alligators and crocodiles and various snakes and things like that. I mean, I think it's possible that, early explorers could have seen some of these creatures in passing and, oh my God, that's terrifying. It's some sort of monster. And, myth kind of can be spun off from that. I think it's also possible that at various points, I mean, we know that, as you mentioned already, like Plesiosaurus, like there were
Yeah.
large aquatic creatures, in the dinosaur era. It's possible that earlier, explorers and adventurers could have found some skeletal remains of, even larger creatures that existed millions of years ago and kind of spun off some legends based on those.
Yeah, those are both great explanations, I think. I was trying to think. The two I put down, different than those, but I think those are all fantastic and great to explain why they would have been out there, particularly in the bigger bodies of water. I was thinking one is like, if it was land that was near a settlement, it may have just been like parenting tactic, for lack of a better term, to keep kids away from the water where they could potentially drown, like stay away from the lake because it has this monster in it. Don't go too far out in it or whatever. Um, so I thought of that as one thing. And then the second thing I thought of was just kind of more meta here. Like if we see something on land, like we can walk to it. We have to climb. We may have to go downhill or whatever to get to it, but we can get there. But when it comes to like the water, it's the concept like you can't see what's underneath of it, unless it's extremely clear water and you have a good view or something. But a lot of these lakes and things where creatures supposedly live have darkish tinted water, and you just can't see what's there. In the ocean, like you're talking about over here, you got thousands and thousands of feet deep. Yeah, you can't see to the bottom. So who knows what could be down there? But it's like the idea of like you can't see it, therefore you can't kind of prove to your mind, perhaps, or maybe to others, what's there. And so I think maybe it's a chance for imagination to maybe take over a little bit more and be more inventive with what you think might be out there. Like we did on our Bigfoot podcast and was like, well, if we could chop down every tree in America, we would conclusively prove if Bigfoot was real or not. But like even as silly as that is, like the dauntingness of, well, there would probably be no way unless we're completely all screwed and dead of like removing water from the planet and the oceans to see if what's really out there would be impossible. But yeah, just it's an interesting concept, I think, of water creatures versus land creatures as far as rationale behind why we might have tales about those. So, all right, well, let's get into this. So let's start the podcast off here with some famous sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, and I tried to make my list as short as possible. There's still a fair number here, but if anybody has other ones they want to add in, feel free. I did put mine in chronological order just to kind of see through the years what was going on. And if I jump past the year you have, just feel free to chime in if you want to add anything or if you want to touch on any of these as well. First one I don't put a lot of stock into, but I only put it on the list just because it was so different than the other ones I found, which was that classic 565 supposed appearance of Nessie. This was by a St. Columbia in the River Ness, which is not Loch Ness, but adjacent to Loch Ness, where apparently the word of God saved somebody from being mauled and dragged away from a creature in the water. So I just put that down as the first mentioned like concrete tale I have about this, unless anybody has anything before that. So if not,
aside
yeah,
aside from just kind of folkloric stories about kelpies or water horses, that kind of date back to antiquity.
yeah,
Uh,
good call.
yeah, and those are usually depicted as being smaller, though. So arguable whether or not it's the same thing or describing the same creature. Although it's interesting, apparently. And I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this because I do not speak Gaelic, but apparently the Gaelic word for water horse is an Nisei or an
Oh.
Nisik, which kind of became corrupted into Nessie, which also, Loch Ness, kind of that connection. Like I
Hmm.
said, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but I did stumble across that. Thought it was kind of a neat little element to throw in there.
I do still remember the classic episode of WCW Monday Nitro where Roddy Piper got hit in the head and started speaking only in ancient Gaelic. That was a real plot point that happened in the 90s. But all right.
Oh,
Well, then I'm going to jump a long way ahead here, but essentially, it seems like the basis of this legend comes from two primary years touching each other here, 33 and 34, 1933 and 1934, where I have a few entries on this, and we get some of our first-hand accounts and also early photographs come out here as well. And I think, let's see, no, we're not going to get film quite yet, but we're going to get close. So let's take a look at some of these. And again, I might have chopped some out, so if there's any you want to add, feel free. So the first one I have is on May 2nd of 1933. This is where there is a Aldi McKay who claimed to have seen a beast or whale-like fish while she and her husband were driving. And this was also the first time the word monster was used to describe the creature, at least supposedly. And when it submerged, it left waves, they said, that resembled a steamship. Later on, she claimed that she did know about the oral tradition of the monster in the loch, so kind of predating all of this as well. And Yes, basically that when this appeared in print, they had said in the article too that this area had some of these older traditions, maybe like Justin's referring to here, that go back years and years and years. And if you've that's the problem with a lot of these stories for podcasts we've done is if there has been information out there about one of these creatures and you are aware of it, on some level that could influence what you're actually experiencing, and you might have the tendency to kind of tie something you're experiencing into a legend that you know of that's already out there. So maybe we're getting into that already with the first one here. Second one I have is on July 22nd, 1933, with a George Spicer and his wife. And now this one's interesting too because they claim they saw a very large creature, up to about 25 feet long is the estimate, walk across the road in front of them, which is not something we typically associate the Loch Ness Monster with doing. So this one's kind of intriguing. Essentially, it says here that it was slightly thicker than an elephant's trunk, and easily wider than the width of the road, which they estimated to be 10 to 12 feet. No limbs, but somehow lurched across the road 20 yards, leaving a trail of broken undergrowth. Said it looked like a dragon or prehistoric animal. Had a long neck that moved up and down in the manner of a scenic railway. This is their quote, not mine. It also had an animal in its mouth. This is, again, a little different than maybe what we traditionally think of with this. Um, and this one was later thought to be fake. 2013, Columbia University did some research on this. Now, this is an interesting one. I don't know if anybody else went down this road or not, but basically determined that Spicer's sighting was probably inspired and fake, but might have been inspired by the long-necked dinosaur from the lake in the movie King Kong, which debuted earlier that year. And they think that
Ah.
was just where basically the idea came from. Now, I don't know if anybody else looked at that or not. I actually went on YouTube and watched the scene where the creature comes out and King Kong grabs it, and I don't see a resemblance, but that's me. So,
um,
had you heard of this one?
in terms of like someone seeing it cross a road, I didn't stumble across that one, but I did find one kind of similar, mine with a few different details. This was involving one Arthur Grant, a 21-year-old university student, veterinary student, who was traveling from Inverness to Glen Urquhart. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. Um, on Friday, January 5th, 1934. It was late at night, around 1 a.m. But he said he saw the creature crossing the road to enter the loch, described it as being about 15 to 20 feet long, and,
Whoa.
quote, it had a head rather like a snake or an eel, flat at the top, with a large oval eye, longish neck, and somewhat longer tail. The body was much thicker toward the tail than was the front portion. In color, it was black or dark brown, with skin rather like that of a whale. The head must have been roughly 6 feet from the ground as it crossed the road. So that's the main like land-based account I was able to find of someone encountering Nessie out of the water.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
Joe, you see anything on your end that was like a land-based creature
No, I did not. That
or
is really
able to
interesting, though.
traverse? It's very different. I mean, I don't know that as much as I've read about this creature, I don't know that that story ever stuck out to me before on land. I mean, if this thing could get on the land, that adds a whole different layer of kind of terror, I think,
Yeah,
to
that's
this legend.
it might explain a few things as well, though.
It's like a
Like,
person on the shore just recording and recording, and the monster's like right behind them, just like shaking their head at him, like, stupid, stupid. Let's see. Some more here. 1933, we have the first photograph of supposedly the Loch Ness Monster. This is by a guy named Hugh Gray. This was from November 12th, 1933. It's a very blurry photograph, which people that have analyzed this believe that you can see the head of his dog in the photo, and it might be his dog fetching a stick from out in the lake. Other people think it might be a swan or perhaps an otter, and the original negative to this photograph has been lost. A lot of it's really old evidence in this particular case, too, we should point out. for whatever reason, a lot of the old stuff is still around and people have gotten their hands on it and have been able to kind of upscale, digitalize it, or go back and analyze photographs and sonar and videos and all sorts of different things. So, okay, so this one kind of mentions, yeah, it could be like a dog or maybe an otter. Otter's kind of a recurring theme here. We'll see through some of these.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
one, as with a lot of the early and well, even more recent photos of supposed Nessie, it's so focused on the subject. There's nothing to give it a sense of scale.
Mm,
So this thing could be the size of a dog, or it could be the size of a bus. There's all you see is water and then the shape. And without something to give it more of a sense of scale as to how big it is, how far away it is, the overall size, it's really hard to say anything with certainty.
yeah, scale's a great thing to bring up because a lot of the ones that we'll look at and have been studied, it's just hard to tell how close zoomed in they are, or if at all, and the waves are sometimes kind of tricky, particularly in this place, as we'll talk about a little bit later here. But yeah, scale's a great thing to bring up and keep in mind here. Let's talk about the big one here. The last one I have from 1934, April 20th. This is the most famous photograph still to today of this. It's called the surgeon's photograph, and this is where we tie together the Loch Ness Monster
Hey, look, it's a Loch Ness Monster.
with gynecology.
Ooh.
So, yeah, Robert Kenneth Wilson, a London gynecologist, is out basically and snaps this photo, which then this is a weird one too, right? So he's out there and he tells people that he saw the monster, but doesn't produce a photograph or say that there was a photograph until the next day when he has sold this photograph with exclusive rights to the Daily Mail, which I assume is some kind of London-based newspaper or something of
Mhm.
that. And then they put the photo basically in the paper along with an interview with him, and he said it was remarkable luck with him able to secure such a photograph. He was looking at the lock when he saw the monster, grabbed his camera, and snapped 4 photos. 2 exposures came out clearly. The first is the famous one with, as Joe just did on camera here, kind of like if you cup your arm or hand up in the air a little bit. Looks basically like a plesiosaur head, possibly sticking out of the water, with a little bit of back maybe. And then the second one has a similar head, but kind of in more like a lower position, maybe going back into the water. The second one did not really get as famous. It's a little blurrier. But let's talk about this one for a minute, because this is really, I think for a lot of people, the image of Nessie that was around for a very, very long time. So what do you have to say about this one?
Um, I'm I could have sworn in my research I think he himself admitted decades later that it's fake. Um,
What?
that it was like a children's bath toy, basically, that he altered a little bit to put like a little the neck part on there and just floated it in the water. Again, this is another photo where there's not a whole lot to really show scale.
Yeah.
He tells you it's gigantic, and he took it from such a long distance. But who's to say? And I swear I dug up something where he, years and years and years down the line, admitted that yeah, it was all just a
I
hoax.
I didn't see anything where he actually admitted that it was a hoax, but I mean it seems like it has been disproven, like debunked. Like it seems like it has widely been considered to have been a hoax for a while now. I mean, honestly, even if it wasn't disproven, like there really is nothing to the picture itself. Like to me, it literally looks like it could have been someone just like sticking their arm out of the water or something. Like, yes, it is kind of shaped like, the plesiosaur, like we would imagine, but
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, as Justin said, there is nothing to give a sense of scale, and it's black and white, and it's like so nondescript, like you can't really see any like facial features or like any detail at all. It kind of just looks like a like black shadow in that kind of shape, like a craned head. So, I mean, I don't think whether or not it had been disproven, I mean, from what I've read, it has been, debunked. Like,
Yeah.
taking it for what it is, I don't know at face value if I would even be like, oh yeah, that definitely looks like a sea monster of some sort.
It's an interesting photo. If you're listening to this, this is probably the one you've seen. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
such an iconic photo. I think it's also helped quite a bit by the fact that it's basically black and white, right? Which is,
Mhm.
if that
Yes.
had been a colorized photo that they took back in the day then, I think it'd be harder for them to say what they, thought it was in terms of scale or shape or what kind of creature it was or
And I mean,
whatnot. But
in fairness, I could see it, causing a sensation back in the day when people weren't, maybe as skeptical or informed about the. I mean, I just had the thought of, there's the famous story about the early, like one of the first films being like the train pulling into the station and people being terrified and thinking it was like coming right at them because they didn't
yeah,
understand how film worked. And or even going back to like talking about King Kong, like when the original King Kong movie came out, people thought it was like amazing and terrifying. If you look at the creatures in that movie now, like I could make something that looks like that out of like modeling clay. Like there's super rudimentary and it's
yeah.
like not even remotely lifelike or believable. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I could maybe see, being closer to that era of, scientific understanding and skepticism and whatnot. I could see people being kind of impressed by this photo, but like looking at it now, like I said, there's like nothing to it really.
Yeah, that's a great point, I think, with the passage of time and how we have to view this thing differently now than back then. I mean, the 1930s, you're going like pre-World War II here. I mean, we'd have to verify this in different ways, but there probably were still species that they were finding, I would think, even back then, 1930s.
Oh
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I would have to think. So, like the concept that there could be this thing out there and maybe they're finding something new probably wouldn't seem all that far-fetched to them.
Yeah.
So. That's a good point. Okay, next one I have is 1938, unless you got anything before that.
Take a quick look here. I've got most of mine arranged chronologically too. Um, da-da. uh, Nothing really too striking. The only other one I would mention
Yeah.
is Alex Campbell, September 7th, 1933. He claimed to have seen it relatively close up,
Hmm.
roughly 600 yards away, which doesn't sound very close, but compared to like, I mean, the loch is, I believe, 20 miles long, give or take, 24 miles long. So, I mean, 600 yards is pretty close.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he claimed that it was about 30 feet long. It was holding its head about 5 feet above the surface of the water, watching two people passing out of the canal leading into the loch. Um, and he said he watched as it turned its head and body very quickly, and then just he watched for about a minute, and then it just sank out of sight. So just the fact that he saw it so close is, an interesting thing because a lot of these sightings do seem to be pretty uh, removed distance wise. So
Okay. Excellent. All right, next one I have is 1938, May 29th. We have a South African tourist by the name of G.E. Taylor. If you haven't seen this one, this would be the Taylor film Loch Ness that I'm looking at here. I put pictures in my notes this week for the first time ever. He filmed something for 3 minutes on 16 millimeter color film, and this is the first filmed recorded presence of the Loch Ness Monster, the Taylor film Loch Ness. There's definitely something floating out there, or it appears that there's something floating out there. What's interesting, I think, to me immediately is after the famous photograph, a lot of these other ones we see, even to modern times, do not have like a creature with its head like as far out of the water as that initial photo taken by the surgeon here, whatever his name was, Wilson. So this one I just put in there, just a little far away, a little blurry, can't really tell what it is, but it's the first time it's been on film, so I thought that was kind of notable regardless. Some sort of a floating object is what people have kind of debunked this one as, but again, it's so far away and so blurry, it's pretty hard to tell exactly what we're looking at here. As
It's
you
a
can imagine
log.
from a home shot video in 1938, as you can imagine, probably not that great of quality. All right. Then I jump all the way to 1954, unless anybody has anything before that.
Um, I have a few.
Okay.
Another close up experience, if you believe the account, and this one seems to be pretty hotly contested, shall we say, from a woman named Greta Finley. She said it was around noon, August 20th, 1952. She was at Elduri Pier with her 13-year-old son. She said that they saw the creature within 20 yards, and it stayed there for several minutes.
Wow.
They described it as about 15 feet long. The head and neck collectively were about 2.5 feet long. The head they described as only about 6 inches long, with two, quote, snail-like projections coming out the top of it, which leads into features that have become like somewhat commonplace in descriptions of Nessie as having like little nubs or horns, but not in all cases. But she described two snail-like projections, quote unquote, and black skin. Um, Now, this there's a lot of contrasting details about this one because certain accounts say that in certain parts of the area where they supposedly saw this, the water is about 22 feet deep, so theoretically it could hold something that big. Others say that, well, according to where she said she was, it's a lot shallower, and those people think that she just saw a deer standing in shallow water, or like swimming across shallow water, and the sense of distance was all thrown off.
Okay.
But then again, she described that after a couple of minutes, it just submerged itself, and a deer wouldn't have done that. So a lot of contrasting elements there. The only other one I want to talk about before what year was yours that you said you were going?
54, I'm going to go to.
Okay, so the other person I want to talk about is John Cobb, who was apparently, I'm not sure if he was like a daredevil or what, but he set out in that year to try to break the world's water speed record.
Hmm.
He had a special boat built called the Crusader. Like by special, I mean it had like a 6,000 horsepower engine. So this thing was big. It was massive. There's pictures of it. It's really interesting looking. So he started out on his attempt to break the record, got up to roughly 200 miles an hour, and then exploded. There are some people who speculate that he collided with the monster, with Nessie, or that he collided with the wake that Nessie left, going by. There's some interesting elements to this one that I want to.
No, there aren't.
I mean, just in terms of like the geography and whatnot of the loch itself.
Yeah.
So I do want to circle back to this one when we get to possible explanations.
Okay.
But I did want to mention that one because
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that.
Yeah, that's a good call. All right. Next one I have 1954. This one I have on the list again only because it's the first. This is the first sonar reading in December of 1954, taken by the boat Rival 3. Where the crew supposedly noticed a large object that was keeping pace with the vessel at a depth of 479 feet, and it followed them for 2,600 feet before contact was lost, and any sonar attempts past that never found it again. So this is the Rival 3 1954 sonar reading. I have a picture of it. There is a kind of sketchy looking blob, but vaguely, I hate to say the word plesiosaur shaped, but vaguely plesiosaur shaped on this sonar reading, which looks interesting. I mean, there's something there on the sonar reading, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. What it is, who knows? And sonar's, not necessarily always the best anyway, but mm-hmm. That's that one. So, all right. And then I jump all the way to 2007 after this. So if you have more you'd like to throw in that gap, have at it.
Yes. I mean, I don't want to necessarily jump in if you had any that came to mind for you, Joe, but I do have several in between that span.
I do not.
Okay. So the big one I want to mention, 1960, the Tim Dinsdale footage, which is it was a short snippet of film that was shot on 16 millimeter stock, black and white, but you can clearly see, and you can find this on YouTube, you can clearly see something in the water moving and creating a wake behind it. And it's not just like moving in one direction, it turns at one point and then I believe turns again. And you can see there's you can see the background, so you can tell scale, which is important. You see like a seagull fly by at one point. I think there's like a car you can see drive by on the road in the background. So this is clearly like being shot at the loch. It's not like in his bathtub or like in a little pond off in the middle of nowhere. So it's got establishing footage in terms of like where it was shot, and it's very interesting just seeing whatever this is. And you can only really see it as kind of like a black dot, but it is very clearly something moving and changing direction, and lasts for about a minute or two. But this footage was he actually had analyzed by the Royal Air Force Joint Air Recon Intelligence Center, where they determined it seemed to be a quote animate object rising 3 to 3.7 feet above the water, moving roughly 10 miles per hour, and the with possibly two humps instead of just like one solid object, but that's a little arguable. And it should be noted that he did film this from inside his car. Like he had gone to, as like a day trip for the explicit purpose of shooting, footage at the loch. And he saw this before he had a chance to get his camera equipment out of the car. So he shot it from like the passenger seat. So there's a little bit of distortion, but it is clearly shot at the loch, which I find this to be just an interesting bit of film, certainly.
Yeah.
Um,
I just
so
watched
yeah,
it. I hadn't seen that one, so that's pretty cool.
It's a
yeah, there's
boat. I'm watching it right now. It's clearly a boat, and you can see its wake behind it. Like, what?
I thought the quality was low enough. I didn't see like a mast. I didn't see like evidence of like a motor kicking up water behind it. The wake, sure, but anything moving through the water would make a wake. But either way, uh, it is one of the few pieces of footage we have that actually shows where it was shot instead of just like here is water and one item in it. So I thought it was neat for that element. Um, let's see. You said it was 2007 you jumped to?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to weed out kind of some of the lesser notable ones. There's the Robert H. Rines photos from 1972. These were also taken with the assistance of sonar, where he rigged up a camera and a flashlight to go off when sonar detected something moving within range underwater. And they would go off. I don't know why he chose every 55 seconds, but that's the time interval he chose as long as the object was still in view, which seems like a really long span of time, which might be why we only have a handful of photos from this. But the most famous of these shows what appears to be a diamond-shaped flipper that they estimated, I guess, based on like how far away it was from the camera when the shot was taken, estimated to be between 4 and 6 feet long. He and there's like a couple other ones from one or two others from that batch that kind of show similar things. 3 years later, June 20th, 1975, he returned, did the same thing, and captured what he claims is a full body shot of Nessie or of something, roughly 25 feet away. And it does look like it's got the standard like football / potato shaped body and long neck of what appears to be a plesiosaur. Roughly the neck roughly 7 to 12 feet long, and this is for a lot of people like the clearest shots, the clearest single frame of what they think is the Loch Ness monster. Though months later, the London Natural History Museum tried to claim it was just a cloud of quote small gas bubbles produced by the larvae of phantom midges, which seems like a stretch. But then again, so is a plesiosaur living, in current year in a lake in Scotland. So it's an interesting photo, one way or the other. Definitely worth taking a look. Um, A lot of these are just like verbal without any visual evidence. Apparently, someone tried to perform an exorcism there in 1973 to rid the lake of this foul creature once and for all. Um, and yeah, that's I've got a few other smaller things, but those are the prominent ones I had from my notes from that time frame.
Yeah, this is good. So, if anybody's listening to this, Justin's describing a couple famous photos here. One is affectionately called the flipper photo from Loch Ness, and then I don't know if this other one has a name per se.
Yeah. Oh, there were finish what you're saying, but there were a few hoaxes in that time frame that I wanted to touch on too.
No, I don't. The other one's like a sonar image. Actually, I'm going to come back to that sonar image later on. But yeah, the one with the fin that
Mhm.
if we're a real photo would be a remarkable photo because it's very clearly a close up of something like a fin, a flipping fin, like
Mhm.
a body, a lower body fin, as
Yeah.
opposed to like a back fin or anything like that.
And it is worth saying that the bottom of this lake is covered in sediment. So it can be kicked up without a whole lot of motion. So it's very hard to get any sort of clear shots underwater because it is murky. Just wanted to get that out there. Um, but a few notable hoaxes that have occurred throughout history too. Um, so jumping back in time a little bit, shortly after the craze first kicked off, 1933, they brought in the Daily Mail. Going back to them, they hired a big game hunter and a photographer to try and get footage of the creature. And they were astonished when they got to like the shores of the loch and they found large three-toed foot or supposedly three-toed footprints, kind of like leading here, there, and everywhere. Um, Footprints that were made and disproven by the British Museum of Natural History, made by a preserved hippo foot that several local youths had acquired because it was a Victorian umbrella stand in their parents' house. So they took that and they started to just like make footprints along the coast to try and, I guess, stir some stuff up. Which, considering that was like the first year that this craze started to gain traction, the fact that people were already making very easily identifiable hoaxes didn't lend a whole lot of credence to this whole thing, and may have kind of tainted people's opinion of it leading onward. So there's that. There was a surgeon's photograph. Um, in 1960-ish, someone managed to acquire whale bones and like put them like on the edge of the lake to try and make it seem like Nessie had died there. Also, 1972, an elephant seal carcass, same sort of thing. And this one, I wrote it down because it's so utterly ridiculous. 1977, Tony Doc Shields shot two very, very clear photos of a neck sticking up out of the water. And if you want to look up the photos, the last name is Shiels. And it's worth noting that this man is a self-proclaimed, quote, wizard and professional psychic entertainer. Some accounts say he, quote, telepathically forced Nessie to rise for those photographs. But they show, like I said, Nessie's neck out of the water, notable for there being absolutely no ripples in the water around these necks. And the man himself later on, like years down the road, claimed, I definitely took photos of lake monsters, but I don't believe in them. So throughout the history of all of this, there have been a ton of people who are out to get their 15 minutes of fame. So I do feel it necessary to point those things out because you should take a lot of this with a grain of salt. No matter how good the photos look, sometimes things look a little too good to be true. So just know what you're dealing with is my best advice. But I'll kick the ball back to Cody, and yeah, you can pick up with 2007, was it?
Okay, let's go. 2007, May 26th. This one, if you want to type into search, is going to be the Gordon Holmes, Holmes video. He's a lab tech. He's there at the lock. And he films about a minute's worth, I would say, of a jet black thing about 46 feet long, moving fairly fast in the water. And many people who have seen this video describe it as among the best footage I've ever seen. Um,
It's wild that this is from 2007, but it looks like it's from 1934.
yeah,
Like,
it is pretty
it
crazy.
is terrible quality.
I totally agree on
And
that part.
that's actually a common theme with a lot of the more recent quote unquote footage. Somehow, the stuff from like 2020 looks worse than a still photo from like 1950. It's bizarre.
Yeah, well, we do get introduced to one of our fun players in this whole mythology here. Um, Adrian Shrine, one of your favorite guys that we saw in said documentary from National Geographic, who is a marine biologist, actually seemed fairly credible in that one documentary, and actually when people would run to him with stuff, even though he was very interested in the Loch Ness Monster, would very typically be like, "No, it's this. No, it's this." So I gave the guy a lot of credit because he was just disproving them as they were bringing stuff to him.
I believe him because of his beard.
It's amazing. You guys got to find this guy, Adrian Shrine, at the
It's
Loch Ness.
Shine. It's
Oh,
Shine. There's no
oh
R in
yes,
there.
you are correct. Shine. Okay. The Loch Ness 2000 Center in Drumnadroitchit said that this is probably an otter, a seal, or a water bird. Looking at this footage, I don't see how it's a bird, but that's me. But maybe the other two.
I could see it being like an otter or a seal. Once
Yeah.
again, looking at this, there's nothing about it to me that says this is definitely a lake monster.
This is Joe
Yeah.
the Believer, everybody. All right. Next one I have is 2012. Justin, anything in that gap from you?
Really, most of the more recent things I was able to dig up were either really poor quality or just transcriptions of what the person said. So,
Okay.
yeah, pretty much this is all you until we get to like possible theories and explanations and stuff.
Okay, I just have a couple more I'll throw in here for different reasons. August 3rd of 2012, we have a guy named George Edwards who took a photograph that he claimed he took on November 2nd, 2011. So the previous fall that showed Nessie. He said it probably looked like more of a manatee type shape, but not a mammal. And said when people see three humps, they're probably just seeing three separate monsters. This person also later admitted that he had faked a photograph he took in 1986, which he had previously claimed was real in a National Geographic documentary. And in 2013, he said that his 2011 photograph was a hoax, but now insisted that the 1986 photograph was genuine.
Seems legit.
Uh,
Yes.
I will
Yes,
say
yes, yes.
one thing we have, one bit of not credit, but one positive point I'll say about the stuff we can find on the internet these days is in one of the books that I checked out from the library, the author on multiple occasions bemoaned not being able to get permission or to get copies of certain photographs because they were being held in certain collections or the person who took them wanted exorbitant fees. Nowadays you can just Google it and these things pop up, and it's nice because you don't have to you don't have to deal with apparently all that crap in the pre-internet age. Um,
For better or worse legally,
for
but
better or
anyway.
worse, yeah.
All right. And then next one I have is 2014, April 19th. If you haven't seen the infamous Apple Maps satellite photo that was
Oh
taken
no.
for Apple Maps, there is a very large creature on the surface of Loch Ness that appears to be, by estimates, about 98 feet long. And it does, in fact, look like a massive catfish near the surface. Um, but the possible explanations here are from least likely to most likely floating wood, seal caused ripples on the surface of this, or most likely the wake of a boat, which was lost when they stitched the photos together, removing the boat, unfortunately. But I mean, if you do go on a website that has this compared to the wake of a boat, it is basically exactly right, but it's
Wow.
also
Yeah.
uncanny how it looks like a giant fish, which I've never would have noticed from a boat's wake
Wait.
before. This hard cider's hitting me hard over here. Cider.
Uh,
Aye. So there's that one. Okay, and then no other concrete ones I had, but I did want to just note on the way out on this segment that we did just have recently somebody pulling up 55-year-old trap cameras that were still down in the lock. If you haven't seen the 55-year-old trap cameras, pull those up. It's kind of fascinating to see how old the camera is, how well
huh.
preserved it was inside its little waterproof buoy. Was placed there originally to like snap photos of disturbances nearby, which they figure was more for monitoring fishing and other things of that nature. But kind of remarkable that that was a technique they were using 55 years ago, and that it was recoverable still today. And then nothing concrete here in terms of individual stories, but just a note that as of 2025, we are still getting new photographs being submitted of the monster and stories still being out there of people supposedly seeing Nessie since. So, all right, well, let's move into the next section here. So, possible explanations and maybe some science behind some of this. And Justin, I feel like you had some stuff you wanted to start with there.
Oh boy. Okay. So I mentioned a lot of my time was devoted to this topic over the past several days, and a lot of that involved math I didn't expect to be doing, um, because it came to mind that okay, so if there is something there, it's probably been there for a while, and because everything dies at a certain point, and there's not really an easy way for something to have gotten into the lock just since 1933. So chances are, if there's something there, it's probably been there since, say, the last ice age, when waters receded and maybe a population got trapped there, which means it had to have been a successful, like a viable breeding population. And in general, the research I've done into that for any sort of animal species, the smallest number of individuals that you can have in a population and have them survive without becoming too inbred is 50. So, okay, let's say there's 50 plesiosaurs somehow living in Loch Ness. They have to eat something. So that led me down a rabbit hole of finding like equations for what number of calories an animal needs based on its body mass in general to just be able to sustain itself, and then multiplying that out by at least 50 individuals over 10,000 years. Like I said, this is a lot of probably pointless math that I did, but once I was into this rabbit hole, I couldn't stop. So the most, again, I'm not a biologist, I'm not an expert in this field, but based on my armchair research and calculations, the most standard equation I could find for the resting energy requirement of an animal, in terms of calories per day, is 70 times its body weight in kilograms raised to three-quarters power. So that led me to seeing like how much an average plesiosaur intact would weigh. And it estimated, and this is what I was able to find. I don't know exactly how much I believe it, but estimated 100,000 pounds. So if you convert that to kilograms, that's 45,359 kilograms. Okay, so you multiply that by 70, raise it to the power of three-quarters. Each Nessie, to sustain itself in rest without like swimming around and doing all the hunting it would need to actually get these calories, would need approximately 75,218 calories per day. Okay, what fish live in the Loch Ness? Again, like I said, this is a lot. So there's a lot of varieties, but the two ones I'm focusing on are Atlantic salmon, because they seem to be the biggest, and brown trout because they're native. Atlantic salmon, despite being very large, are migratory, so they're not there all the time. But how many calories are in your average Atlantic salmon?
Wait, where do they migrate to?
Well, I mean, there is a canal, I believe,
Yeah,
that
at the north end, yeah.
Yeah.
or
So
the east,
that
I
I
guess.
believe is how, yeah, I think that's how they end up getting through, but I don't think it's big enough to permit the passage of something as big as an
Okay.
Loch Ness Monster, unless they can travel over land, but that's a whole different kettle of fish,
What
no
if
pun
it pays the
intended.
toll? About 350.
Finding some stats on there are a lot of websites about Loch Ness itself, that are run by the park that's there, the museum and whatnot. Um, so according to one of these sites, Atlantic salmon can be up to 20 kilograms in size. So that's pretty big. But that's like the upper range. So I said, okay, maybe 15 kilograms per fish. How many how many calories are in a kilogram of Atlantic salmon? Well, I was able to find calories per ounce, which I did a whole bunch of calculations to get to kilograms. Long story short, per Atlantic salmon, there are roughly, for the entire fish, 14,160 calories per fish, which means a single Nessie would have to eat 5 to 6 salmon per day just to maintain its body mass at rest. But again, they're migratory; they're not there all the time. Brown
That was
trout,
surprisingly less than I thought you were going to come up with after all that.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
same.
okay.
I was surprised by that too. But like I said, they're seasonal. They're not there all the time. So Dessies would have to survive on things like eels and char. But brown trout seem to be a native species. There's a lot of them. I wasn't able to find exact numbers, but they seem to be the number one fish in the loch. So I went with them. They're only roughly 2 kilograms each. And I was able to find, thankfully in metric this time, so I didn't have to do as many conversions, roughly 100 kilograms of brown trout is about 149 calories. Therefore, a whole fish would be just under 3,000 calories, 2,980. So that means a single Nessie would have to eat 25 trout per day just to maintain its body mass and not starve. So, all right, so we've got the basic numbers to work with. Say there's baseline 50 animals, 50 Nessies. So that means they would have to eat 250 to 300 salmon per day or 1,250 trout per day. Extrapolate that out to a year, and I'm not counting the salmon in this because they're not there all year. So for 1 year, each Nessie would have to eat. I'm sorry, like the population of 50 Nessies would have to eat 456,250 trout per year, which sounds like a lot. And I don't, like I said, I wasn't able to find exact numbers of how many brown trout are in Loch Ness, but it doesn't seem like they would be able to support 50 hungry Loch Ness monsters that are trying to sustain themselves on 2 kilogram fish. And scene. And that's not even
How
getting into the corpses.
how many
Because
Girl Scout cookies would a Loch Ness monster need to eat to sustain itself?
I don't know, those things are pretty fattening. Um, but also the bodies have to go somewhere. So this is the last of the math I'm going to do, I swear, and it's a lot shorter. So I don't know how long a plesiosaur lives. No one really knows how long a plesiosaur would live if they're still around. So let's just throw a number out there, and this is incredibly fuzzy math. Let's say they live for 200 years, big long life, just swimming around eating fish. So let's say this population has been there since the last ice age, roughly 10,000 years ago. That
Hmm.
means 50 generations of 50 creatures. So somewhere there are 2,500 corpses in or around the loch of Nessies that no one has found yet. And they're not like sharks. They have full skeletons of bones. It's not just like their jaws that survive, but there's no remains that have been found. And granted, the loch is pretty big. It's roughly 17 to 1800 square kilometers just in area. But that's a lot of Nessie carcasses. So you'd think someone would have found something by now.
Hmm.
So, um, just based on the math, I have serious doubts that there is a breeding population of Nessies there that have survived
Have you
to
considered
present
that
day.
they are also cannibalistic and starting with the original 50, they've been slowly eating each other off?
Please don't make me do the math as to how many calories are in a Nessie carcass.
What if
Ah,
they are alien? What if they're ancient aliens and the way that they actually, sustain themselves has nothing to do with eating fish or anything? What if they have some sort of internal cold fusion that just keeps them going indefinitely? We don't know how these aliens work.
could
Wasn't that the
be.
plot to an episode of Gravity Falls?
I
It
have no
does.
idea.
It's a great show, by the way.
It
So
was a
check
great
that out.
show, yeah.
Disney Plus, check it out.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Uh,
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, you definitely hit a couple I was going to touch on here, which was the food and the breeding population. Jody, anything you want to mention here on the science aspect of all this?
No, I don't think it's even worth going that into detail about. Like it is a combination of boats and misidentification of like seals and other creatures.
Not to theories yet, Joe.
Well,
All
I'm
right.
not theorizing. I'm just telling you the truth.
All right. Well, let's throw a couple more statistics. Oh, statistics
I
is
said no more math.
no, no. It's not math because they're single numbers, so it's just not math. But anyway, they did basically, I think, in most of the documentaries I watched, conclusively prove that Loch Ness was connected to the sea once upon a time, perhaps 14,000 years ago. And this was in addition to simulations they ran, they also did dig into the silt that Justin is referencing here, and they did find things like seashells and other animals that would only have existed out in the ocean. So they have pretty conclusive evidence that this was tied. I mentioned this only from a if a creature were to go from the ocean into this place once upon a time type thing. The bigger problem for me here with the timeline is their estimate that 10,000 years ago during the ice age, there was a block of ice basically where Loch Ness would have been, and they think the entire lake would have froze, including any animals which would have been inside of said block of ice. So that's a problem, perhaps. And then on top of that, as Justin mentioned here, we've done some pretty good scans of this place by this point, including up to today, where they have pretty good technology now compared to back then when they used to try to do this with sonar and other things, to where they can identify rocks on the bottom and debris and silt and everything else. And I will say another theory that I remember even from a kid that basically has been debunked because they've scanned the bottom of the lake so many times is there was always the theory of like the hidden caverns on the bottom of like where this creature could go into, and they have not found any evidence of any caves on the bottom of this lake to date. So
eh,
Oh
mm,
no.
I just stumbled across this one today, and it's a matter of the person who claims to have found multiple cave entrances around the loch refuses to give the exact locations because she doesn't want them being like overrun with tourists or whatever. But apparently, there is someone named Paige Daly who runs the official Loch Ness TikTok channel. So make of that what you will.
oh,
Claims that not the loch itself, but a river connected to the loch. She has found multiple entrances to an underground cave system, some that are submerged, and that she believes that there could be something living in there. Whether or not it's a population of Nessies is up for debate, but again, no location, no photos that I was able to find. But basically, she claims that yeah, there are caves, something could be there.
okay,
So make of that what you will.
all
People
right.
claim a lot of things.
I
They
will
do.
make of that what I will. Justin mentioned the lack of corpses, which was that in the National Geographic documentary, or was that a different one I watched where they were looking for the corpses?
I don't think it was the National
It wasn't
Geographic
the one I
one.
watched.
Okay,
I
there was one documentary that was specifically about them looking for the corpse of the Loch Ness monster.
huh.
They were like digging stuff off the bottom with a little robot they had and like analyzing the samples, and they found 105 or 115 targets across the loch that were like possibly the size of a decomposing corpse, and they were going around checking all them and did not did not find anything of note. Matter of fact, that Adrian Shine guy, I believe, they were bringing stuff to him in that one too, and he was like, "This is this type of clay. You'll find this type of clay underneath it. This is this type of thing." So that's it there. Last thing I will mention here for the science and explanation section, minus one other thing I'll mention here in a second for the next part, is they did. I don't know if it was that same documentary or not. It was the one where they had the rings. Was that in the National Geographic one where you could see the rings from space?
Oh yeah, yeah. That
So
was in
they.
Lake Baikal, I believe. But yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, they did find some geothermal vents in Loch Ness, I believe. I'm going to double check this
I
now.
think I want to say that was in Lake Baikal, but I could be wrong.
Let's check. Because now I'm trying to think about this, if it was the fact or not. So, well, I don't know. We'll have to come back to this because I got to keep looking it up. We'll double check that. But let's jump into some of these theories of what the Loch Ness Monster could have been, of which there's a pretty long laundry list because it's been around forever, but we can do these fairly quick, I think. So let's start with the most traditional one here, dinosaur or plesiosaur. Comments.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself here because I just went through that whole big long, things taped to the wall, lines going through them section of math, saying that there couldn't be a breeding population of Nessies, of plesiosaurs in the loch just because food and the where the corpses have gone. Again, this is a long shot, but there is something called the Caledonian Canal that was built in 1803. Now, this was a project to basically make a passage from sea to sea, linking the locks in Scotland. I don't think it's at this point big enough for like anything to traverse, but at the time, I mean, there are theories that somehow during the construction of this, when they did finally connect it, and this stretches like to the northeast of Loch Ness, that somehow, unnoticed by anyone working on it, a plesiosaur may have reached the work site and made its way into the loch where it still lives today. And I don't know how long plesiosaurs supposedly live. It could have been carried in by the water that flowed in when they finally connected things. If it was young, theoretically, it could have lived long enough to maybe be caught on film in the early 1930s if you're really being generous. That's a theory that's out there. I just wanted to talk about that as possibly explaining how a single creature instead of a breeding population may have ended up in the loch. And it's a stretch. I acknowledge that.
How many calories would that require, though?
Just one. It would be a lot more doable than a population of 50 of them.
Okay,
So,
okay. Maybe it was chasing the Atlantic salmon in.
Maybe. There you go.
Maybe.
There you go.
Yeah.
Its seasonality killed it off. This one's really hard for me just because I feel like even though this is the way I think it's traditionally shown, there's nothing to support this one.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I think that is the most likely explanation for the way that it is, typically depicted. Like if it did actually exist, it would make sense that it was some sort of plesiosaurus that, survived and got into Loch Ness, but
Hmm.
I don't think there is any reasonable explanation for that actually having occurred and being the situation.
Yeah.
I definitely
Like,
think, for all of the marketing of it, the plesiosaur is a, well, quite frankly, pleasing shape to depict this creature as compared to other things it could be. So I could see why this one may live on is what's there, but it doesn't seem to be a lot to support this one. Briefly here, salamanders or whales?
uh, whale runs into the same problems that a plesiosaur would, I think. Um, Also, the lake is freshwater, which also would be a problem for a single plesiosaur getting washed into it during a connection to the sea. Yeah, if freshwater creatures don't generally do well in saltwater and vice versa. So eels, maybe there are some eels in the loch, not that big, but maybe also they did do DNA tests of the water to see like if there was any unidentifiable like remnants of DNA of something that had been there for a while. And I'm not sure exactly what year they did this, but they did bring up eel DNA, but nothing anomalous that could be attributed to something like a plesiosaur. So eels marginally more plausible than plesiosaurs. Whales, I don't think so.
Yeah, salamander, not much. Eels is an interesting
Yeah.
one to me. And I think you might be right. I think I may have my my lakes mixed up here with the geysers underneath. I'm trying. There says there may be like some activity below Loch Ness, but they don't have the vents. I was
Mhm.
really banking on for my theory here, unfortunately. So I have
Well,
to
you weren't
switch
going to
that
go
up.
Hollow Earth.
No, but what I was going to suggest, and I had looked up here, is if geothermal geysers do leak radiation, and it probably is not in a sufficient amount. It says typically that it might mutate something, but that would be a weird
It's
scientific way to
Godzilla.
actually say what's going
Uh,
on here. Eels is interesting to me though, because I do feel like if there were some type of large eel, it possibly could be a good answer for this.
yeah,
It doesn't, I was reading about because electric eels are not real eels, so they do need air, but a real eel does not need air, so typically would never surface. Could potentially maybe bury itself down in the silt at the bottom. I don't know. I mean, it could
yeah.
avoid detection a little bit better than others.
Mhm.
So maybe. How about otters? This was mentioned a couple times just tonight on our podcast. Could they be the explanation of some of these early ones, if nothing else? The
Maybe in
weird
the
thing,
early ones, but I mean, I feel like otters are maybe typically not large enough for
yeah,
someone to mistake it for being Nessie.
I do think they could be a plausible explanation for the photos and videos that you sometimes see of like quote unquote multiple humps,
Yeah,
where it
that's
could
fair.
just be otters going in a line, and if each otter isn't terribly big, and it's a lot more probable to have a group of them going by than one big long creature that somehow
That
has
is
a spine
true.
that can make four
yeah.
humps.
Okay,
Yeah.
I could see that.
Certainly the most adorable explanation.
Yes.
2 to 6 feet typically in length. I mean, that's not very big. So if you're a long distance away, that's going to appear to be almost nothing,
Hmm. But the wake
which,
behind it might be more noticeable.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I feel like most of these sightings are far enough away that even if we believe that these people saw something, I don't think most people, especially in like spur of the moment situation like that, are going to accurately be able to judge the size of what they're seeing at that sort of distance. So
Hmm.
I feel like it's possible that it could have been like otters or something that is actually smaller than what they perceived it as. And I mean, as Justin was saying, they could have also been just seeing like the movement of the water around them or something like that.
Hmm.
So I guess maybe the size is not as big of a
as big as it would seem.
issue.
Hmm.
Yeah. With the most famous photograph being basically debunked and possibly even the person themselves saying it was a hoax, people that saw that photograph, another idea they had early on with some of these sightings was an elephant's trunk. Like there were records of circuses that were traveling in the area at the time, and it said it would not have been implausible for them to take an elephant down to like just swim for a little while or brush itself off. I don't know, anything you see to an elephant here.
That's dumb.
Oh,
Well, I mean, even like given that circumstance, if it was a circus where they, were taking an elephant to, get some water or whatever, there presumably would have been circus folk around. Like there would have been, people around minding the elephant and making sure it didn't try to wander off or anything.
yeah.
And I would think that would be pretty obvious to anyone who is like observing the scene.
Tell
Hmm.
that to the hippos in the Amazon. I mean, it's drug lord. The answer is drug lord. Final answer. Catfish. Any chance this is caused by large catfish, or maybe even a species of catfish we don't know about?
I have watched a lot of the series River Monsters,
Okay.
and I feel like it's funny to me because I'm looking at Wikipedia and they have the Wells catfish specifically listed, but I do see that Jeremy Wade, the host of River Monsters, apparently thinks it might be something else. But he frequently attributes various claims of river monsters around the world to being the Wells catfish. Like it is a species of catfish that can grow to be quite large and is pretty terrifying. So
I
aside from I mean, aside from like the initial famous photograph that's been debunked that shows what looks like that head, sticking out from the water, Like the other photographs and videos that I've seen, I could see plausibly being, a large catfish of some sort because mostly all you're seeing is kind of the back of something, maybe like just below the surface of the water, or again, just kind of the, wake or ripples around it.
This thing's fucking
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, they get huge,
Jesus
like,
Christ.
yes, like hundreds of
Yeah.
pounds.
So I am in agreement that this is probably one of the more plausible explanations we've come across so far. Because yeah, holy crap,
I mean, catfish in general are creepy, and back in northern Michigan where I'm from, they have a lot of different types of catfish, but this thing's fucking terrifying.
creepy and delicious.
And this would, yeah, would based on your river monster knowledge, catfish obviously bottom dwelling, bottom feeding at least. Would they typically come to the surface like that?
That I do not 100%
Or
know.
or would they only surface every 15 to 20 years? Because
Uh,
maybe.
uh,
Wow, that's a
They apparently, I mean, the Wells catfish can apparently exceed 9.8 feet and 440 pounds.
damn.
Justin, how many fish would I need? Oh, wait, this is a bottom dweller. Wouldn't matter, right?
So
Because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not a meat
True.
eater. So this one can just chew on the bottom. Wow. Okay. Well, that's an interesting option. I got to keep that one in mind here.
Yeah.
Continuing on to finish up just the living things possible theories here actually is the opposite, but idea that there was a creature and is now dead. Any credence to that? I know we talked about corpses and they were looking for them, but is there a chance that there actually had been some kind of creature 1933, 1934 when we had all those initial explosions of sightings and tales and that was also we should mention one thing I don't think we said was
Mhm.
they had just opened a road for public access to get to the loch easily at that time period. So there wouldn't have been many people there at all prior to this, but now people would be
Mhm.
going there.
Yep, I was going to mention that. They also, as a follow up to that, when they improved that road, they cut back the undergrowth a lot, so that there would be a nice view of the loch. And they kept doing that until it became too costly to keep that up because it was a lot of brush and trees and stuff that kept just coming back. Uh, so that would also explain why there were so many sightings, in that like 1933, 1934 range, and then all the vegetation grew back, blocked a lot of the view of the loch, and
Mm,
people weren't able to get as clear of a look at it anymore. Um, so um, the idea that there could have been something there that people just so happened to notice when a road was put through and a clear line of sight was established, and that only survived it survived long enough to generate a bunch of buzz, and then in the years since died. That's I don't know. It seems a bit of a stretch because so many things line up just perfectly and coincidentally for this to have just had its perfect timing in the spotlight and then to fade away without any evidence of it whatsoever, aside from a few grainy photos and videos. It's not impossible,
yeah.
but then again, okay, where did it come from before that? Unless it swam up through the canal, the Caledonian Canal that I mentioned before. And again, that's like another element that had to fall into place perfectly, and not
Yeah,
yeah, not ruling out entirely, but I'm skeptical.
I agree. I mean, it's not impossible, but very few things are impossible, but I don't think it's very plausible. Like I think it is very unlikely that, as Justin said, these circumstances lined up perfectly. This creature existed just long enough for someone to see it and then just disappeared again for the next like 100 years.
Yeah. The biggest issue for me with this one probably is just the purported size of the creature because I was even just as you guys were just talking, I was even just thinking we did I think we did a podcast. Yeah, we did a podcast on the Mothman,
Mhm.
right? So
Yes,
this
we
is another
did.
another creature that supposedly showed up randomly at one point and
Mhm.
basically has been gone after that quick little spurt of publicity it had. But the problem here being again that this creature would have had to have been a massive creature or much larger than whatever that supposedly was, and then
Mhm.
also have somehow made it into the lock and somehow disappeared. So Of the living or deceased creatures explanations, the catfish is kind of intriguing to me now.
Mhm.
Of those, but let's go on to a couple non-creature explanations for this, including simple logs.
There are some of these shots and even some of the videos that it just shows a smallish dark lump that doesn't seem to do much, and there's a bit of a wake generated around it, probably from the current, or from waves going by. I could easily see those as being logs or some sort of debris.
Agreed. Yeah, there's like no movement like in any direction. There's no sign of like fins or anything. I could believe the log explanation as well.
Yeah, this is, though it's not one I would certainly want to be the answer, but it's pretty hard to vote against this one just purely from there's a lot of woods around there still to this day. There's going to be lumber. It's going to fall into the lock, and I could easily see how people could see that and think it's something else. For
Mhm.
sure. All right. And then this next one, I think maybe is going to get into a Justin tirade here. Let's talk about the unusual property of waves in Loch Ness. Could it be waves? Is this where you wanted to go?
Yes, and this one actually is it's really different and compelling, I think, because the lock has it's very long and very narrow. Well, I mean, I say very. It is 22 miles long, give or take, and at its widest, or generally around a mile wide. So a mile wide isn't really narrow, but compared to its length, it's it's definitely like just a strip for the most part. And due to from what I understand, due to the properties of like the cliff sides and like the banks that form around the loch itself, there waves and wakes from boats or other things passing through can linger for hours after like a boat has passed. Its wake goes around behind it, but it can ricochet and just rebound off of this narrow space for just hours after the boat has gone by. And depending on the exact geometry of like how those wakes intersect, they can form strange patterns, including things that look like um, something moving against the current, or something that's solid that actually is just the remnants of a wake from a boat that went by an hour ago. It's really bizarre, and but at the same time, it seems a lot more plausible that people might have seen some of these, especially in the indistinct photos that we're getting, and thought this is a solid object, a living thing. It's there, and then it looks like it submerges, but that's just the wake kind of dissipating or moving on. So there's a lot more to this one than it seems, in my opinion, at least. What about you guys?
I agree. I mean, I also watched that documentary where they talked about the property of wakes in Loch Ness and how it is a little bit unusual. And I mean, I think especially when we consider that Apple Maps photo, like with the
Mhm.
comparison of like, the overlay of the boat wake, like you can see how someone could confuse that and think that that looked like a giant fish or something. And so if you consider the possibility that in Loch Ness, the wake could stay around, as Justin said, for even like an hour after a boat actually passes, I don't think it's, impossible to believe that someone could see that and think that it was some sort of giant fish or other creature.
Mhm.
All right. I have problems with this one. I
Okay.
liked the idea when it was initially proposed, and I don't claim to be a scientist and definitely don't claim to understand how all forms of waves work because God knows there's enough intricate things about waves that are all different here and there. P.S. Did you guys see that link I just sent you?
Oh,
I'm looking at it right now.
It's
on
the
my phone.
live trail cams or live streams around the thing there, and
Oh,
if you
yeah.
click on the Shoreland Lodges cam at the moment, it looks like it's fucking raining or snowing or sleeting or hailing. I'm not really
Oh,
sure.
it sure is.
But
Weird.
if you go on
Huh.
the weather app and check the weather there currently, it says it's clear. So I don't know what's going on exactly at this moment,
Huh.
but something wacky's going on there.
Okay.
But anyway, back to the waves. So when they first announced this one in that documentary of National Geographic we watched, I thought it was a pretty logical one because of the potential like length of the side of a wave could easily look like and resemble a long creature that was maybe darker, maybe churning up, things of that nature. The more I thought about this one, though, even with their bizarro reflections of the waves and the straight walls that are steeped on both sides of this thing they could bounce off of, some things about this started to not make sense to me, and they're the scientists, so I believe what they're saying. But if you were to see a creature moving, it would have to have like forward or backward momentum to appear to be moving to you as an observer, and a bouncing wave, you would only be able to tell if it was moving if it was a long wave, as we're proposing here to simulate a long sea creature. The only way you'd be able to detect motion in that would be like if it was moving towards or away you from you, not the opposite way, like perpendicularly, if that makes any sense. So you're basically seeing like the side of the wave, more or less, if it's going forward or backwards. But what they're kind of proposing would be like the front or back of the wave that you would be seeing looking like a long, stretched out object. So once I started thinking about this more, I'm like, I'm not sure that it makes any sense because the only way you would see the motion of forward momentum, you would have to be somehow, how it could be explained. Let me go back to this. You guys have all lived on the Great Lakes here near Michigan. If you're out near the shore and you're swimming and it's a wavy day, there's waves, they roll in off of, whatever from out in the lake. The the trick to this is, they move in a line and then they come and then they splash essentially. And here I guess we're saying they're bouncing off the walls and they're reverberating and splashing back and whatnot. If you watch a lake, you can see like here's a wave that's whatever 500 feet long out there, and then as it gets to like part of that wave dies out, and then like it'll extend in a different spot, and that could explain how it could look like it's continuing momentum in a forward motion. The problem is that's not how wake waves work. They don't randomly stop working in some spot along the wake line and then pick up a new spot along the wake line, unless they're saying just the fact that these bounce around for so many hours that somehow you're getting like some cross movement, and maybe that's what's explaining some of this. So when I first heard this one, I was like, okay, that's a really good example of explaining a lot of these things we're seeing. But the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't know if that makes sense. And I guess I base that more on just personal time spent in the water and thinking about how this would look from an observer stationary in one spot observing a wave. But I don't know that you can simulate what would look like something moving forward in the water with wake based on all the things I'm saying here. That being said, they're obviously the scientists, they think it must be true in many cases, so maybe there's something I'm missing here. And like I said, I don't claim to fully understand all the different types of waves that are out there, but it just doesn't add up entirely in my head the more I see this. So I don't know. Am I crazy on this? Justin, you look like you were nodding and shaking your head. And
No, I don't know enough about fluid dynamics to really say definitively one way or the other, but you do make some interesting points. I this one simply because I'm not an expert in the subject. I'm realizing I can't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. Interesting, but I don't have a solid enough foundation of the physics to really say more than it's neat to think about.
it's also weird that they seemed pretty high on this theory in several things I watched, but it's also it's also a bit of a for as much as they explained away a lot of these different possibilities for what the Loch Ness monster could be, also a bit of a like catch-all that they're like, well, these wakes could just last for hours and hours and hours, and therefore, if there's absolutely no boats on this lake for half a day, when you see something, must be a wake from a boat that was there at 9 a.m. this morning, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't know.
Hmm.
All right, last one I have here. Wait, is there anything else you wanted to say, or did I miss you talk about your uh, ship that was going for the high speed that was tied into the waves here?
Oh, yeah, the idea being that instead of running into the creature or the awake left by the creature, it might have been awake left by even one of the guy's support boats that, considering he was going really, really, really fast, the slightest disturbance could have caused disaster. So there could be bitter irony that some of his support staff ended up resulting in his death
Yeah,
simply by trying to maneuver into position earlier on. So it's that's the only tie-in to the whole wake thing. So
yeah, it would be tragic if that's what
yeah,
actually happened here, but
yeah.
okay. And the last thing I have, unless you guys have other ones, is could this just have always been a hoax?
Yes.
It's
Well, now let me
possible.
let me be clear here now, because there's a difference between hoax and misidentifying objects that happen to be in the lock. I think those are two very different things here. So, do you think this is an active thing that people have tried to, like, similar to maybe like a Bigfoot type situation where people have gone out of their way to keep this legend going, as opposed to just scientifically we could explain away everything that we have seen and it has not been the efforts of man?
I don't know if I would necessarily believe that every supposed sighting was a
Sure.
hoax, but I do believe that several of them have likely been intentional hoaxes. And I think that the more that hoaxes perpetuate the idea of this creature existing, that can kind of feed into the imaginations of people that are, visiting the area and maybe lead them to believe that things that they are seeing could be, Nessie. Like when we're talking about the waves and stuff, Justin, I know you're familiar with like ghost hunting.
Mhm.
It made me think about orbs. Like everybody, takes pictures and they get what they think are orbs, which they and
They're
it's
like, oh
it's
my
like
god.
it's dust particles. Like it's always
Yes.
just like dust particles. It's nothing. But
Hmm.
like people get these like little glowy looking things on camera and like, oh my God, it must be like spiritual energy.
Hmm.
Like people will very easily read into things and see something that is not really there if it, aligns with something that they're looking for.
Yep. Yeah, and that kind of bias is always something to keep in mind. But beyond that, there's the thing with cryptids is whether they exist or not, they add a certain flavor, a certain personality to the locality where they're found. And to be a little more jaded about it, they add money. So there is a vested interest in the area around the loch to keep to keep the mystery alive, to keep the folklore going because it brings in tourists. It brings and tourists bring in money. Like my wife, when she was, I think around, I think she was still in high school. She said she and her parents went to visit Loch Ness. They went on a tour of the loch itself, and they went. There's a museum there, and the funny thing is, the entirety of the museum tour is all about debunking Nessie. It's like this photo was probably just this, these accounts were exaggerated, there's no scientific bearing for this being a dinosaur that has somehow survived 65 million years in seclusion. Just very hard science, very descriptive, very just debunking everything. And then you exit into the gift shop, and you know what's in the gift shop? Everything Nessie all the time. Plushies, t-shirts, hats, mugs. It's just because they know the myth is what keeps people coming in. So even though the museum itself is very logical and very reasonable about what people are there for, they know that they still have to give people what they want. So is a lot of I'm sure, and I've detailed a few of them. Some of the accounts and photos and stories over time have been straight up hoaxes. Um, Others may have just been misidentifications. I don't think there's like some big conspiracy to
Hmm.
basically keep drawing people in. It's just simple economics. it's and whether you want to call that a hoax or not is a matter of personal preference. But I
I mean, capitalism is the greatest hoax anyone ever pulled. So,
I mean, no lie there. But yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say, oh, it's a 7 decade long hoax at this point.
Yeah.
It's just it started out somebody claimed they saw something, and then like with UFOs, huge mass of reports and accounts and whatnot come spilling in. Then it dies off for a bit, but it never quite goes away. Um, so I think it's a little unfair to say it's straight up like a purposeful hoax that's been going on this long, but certain elements of it certainly are, but not the whole thing.
Yeah, I would agree with those sentiments exactly from you guys. Additionally, it seems like unless you're going there, then you're like a crazy who's like, I gotta see the creature on this trip. From all accounts, I mean, this looks like, and people say is one of the most beautiful places they have seen. So even going to experience the Loch Ness area up here in Scotland is just supposedly a wonderful experience, regardless of what you see. So like you said, maybe it's tourism to bring people into this place and they get their dollars from people. And if they have a good time, great. If they get an unexplained phenomenon that happens while they're there, all the better. But it seems like a pretty good place to go regardless. So,
Mhm.
all right. Were there any other explanations people had? I don't want to
I
cut
got
anybody
one.
off. Yeah. Does it
I
start with
would
an A and end with Lians?
thankfully no, and I'm glad we didn't go down that particular hole. But have you ever heard of temperature inversions? That's so temperature inversions are an atmospheric thing where different layers of air have different temperatures, and that can change how light interplays between those layers. And it's not always just between layers of air. In this case, it could be the temperature of the air could differ enough from the temperature of the water in the loch to cause optical illusions that could distort or magnify distant objects.
that sounds like
Um,
ball lightning.
I love that reference. But interestingly, in conditions over a lake, um, temperature inversions tend to occur most often when conditions are relatively calm, when it's a warm day, and when it's sunny. And coincidentally, most Nessie sightings happen when things are relatively calm, when it's sunny, and when it's warm out. So I think a non-zero percentage of these sightings could just be optical illusions. There is like a rock or a log or something out there that looks bigger than it is because the light is literally playing tricks on your eyes.
Hmm.
So yeah, this one it certainly can't account for everything, but I do think it's important to acknowledge, the fallibility of human senses here.
That
And
is
it's not
really
just like your
interesting.
yeah, it's not just your eyes. It can also, affect what you see on film because, it's picking up the same light waves and everything. So
Weird.
yeah.
Definitely think like this presence of scale is interesting. Just like people A genuinely don't know how big things are. And then B, if you're at a distance and it's something that's a little unfamiliar to you or not clear, even more so, like they just do not understand these things.
Mhm.
So that's interesting to me. All right, well, let's wrap up here. Any last thoughts before I'm going to throw a quick number on you guys here? You know what? Let's do the number first, and then let's do final thoughts if you have anything else you want to say. So I'm going to give you guys a 1 to 10, 10 being yes, 1 being no. Do you think there was ever something strange in Loch Ness?
Like ever in the history of the world or ever
Well,
since
Since
1934?
1933.
yeah, let's say since 1933, I guess.
Okay.
Do you think there was ever anything in Loch Ness that was unusual?
Are we counting the creepy ass catfish as something unusual or
So interestingly, I was just Googling that. There are no catfish in Loch Ness. No
yeah,
DNA found in the water for catfish either, nor are there sturgeon, which was
So,
another thing
mm,
somebody
I
suggested.
mean, so like going along with Justin's question. So the question is not, do we think the Loch Ness monster as generally depicted as a plesiosaur exists? Like
Correct.
so that is not the question. You're
That
just
is
saying,
not the
has
question.
anything weird ever
Anything weird? Do
existed?
you think there has ever been anything weird there?
And 10 is yes.
10 is yes, 1 is no.
Okay. I'm going to say 3.
That's higher than I would have guessed from some of the comments tonight. Um,
Okay, if we're just doing straight up rating with no commentary, I will say 4.
yeah, I tend to fall right about where you guys are at as well. So I'm going to say, I will also say 3 actually on this one, which breaks my heart, but that's what I will put up a number on that. And then I'm actually going to throw a second number at you guys here before final thoughts, which is from 1 to 10, 1 being no, 10 being yes. Do you think they will ever discover something new in Loch Ness?
Like with regards to the alleged monster
Yeah, with
or
regards to monster or possible explanations for monsters.
1.
I am also going to go with a 1 on this one, primarily because I don't know when these started and I haven't been able to find a start date. All I know is it was after my wife took her trip there in high school because they didn't offer this then. They now give daily tours on what they call the Deep Scan Cruise, which is a boat you can charter, and they last from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And this boat is equipped with sonar. And even if this has been going on for say 10 years, that is a lot of scanning of the below the surface environment of the loch, and there hasn't been anything conclusive that has come from that I've been able to find.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
because of that, I find it very very unlikely that they're going to find anything momentous or like a strange new creature or what have you.
I'm gonna. Oh, wait, what number did you give it a 1?
1.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a 2, and that's only because I do believe they have enough silt on the bottom that potentially they could find something if they were to somehow. But the trick is that even in the documentaries I watched where they were going down with the robots and like trying to just pick up this one little thing and bring it to the surface, like the motion of doing this like stirred up so much silt around it that it was almost impossible. They had, matter of fact, they had the one robot had something in its little cup that they had capped underwater, and then as they were going to pull it up, they saw this second area of interest, and they were like, "Ooh!" And the guy's like, "I'm pretty sure I can get both of them in this cup without losing the first one." And I was like, "There's no way he's going to be able to pull this off." Surprisingly, he managed to do it and get them both to the surface. But I was like, "This is how they lose their
nice.
evidence, right?"
Yep. What a
Yes.
coincidence. Yeah.
What a quinky dink. All right. Any other thoughts here? Closing thoughts tonight?
I mean, just to kind of explain my numbers a little bit more, I love the idea of Nessie existing just as a bit of folklore and a story. Like Scotland is probably at the top of my list of, places I would like to visit in the world. And if I go there, I would definitely want to try to go to Loch Ness, just, because of the legend and all that. I think it's fun. Um, but I don't think there is any even remotely compelling evidence that there's a giant lake monster living there. I mean, Loch Ness is a large lake, but it is not like it is 1/1000th the size of Lake Michigan in terms of surface area.
Wow.
Ooh.
Like even Lake Ontario, the smallest Great Lake, is 333 times larger than Loch Ness.
Wow.
So to me, if I was telling Alexis this yesterday when we were watching, or a couple days ago, I guess at this point, we were watching the documentary. Um, if these legends had to do with like a monster in the ocean, I would be much more likely to believe it. I
Mhm.
mean, as Justin mentioned earlier, like we have not even begun to scratch the surface of exploring the oceans on this planet.
Mhm.
I used to be a big fan of Sequest DSV back in the day. And I
Damn
just,
straight.
yeah, but I mean, it was a fun show, but like, I think that is a fascinating idea because it's true. Like, there are these just vast swaths of this planet that we
Hmm.
just have no real idea what is going on down there. So, I mean, if I were to give it, if we were talking about something living in the ocean, my number would be like way higher. But
Yeah.
given that it is this lake, in the middle of Scotland, which again is a large lake, but not an inordinately like crazily large lake, I feel like if this thing existed, especially as Justin said, the amount of scanning that has gone on, the amount of, time that God knows how many people have spent specifically trying to capture evidence of this thing, somebody would have found something by now. And it would
Yeah.
have been more than, a film shot in 2007 that looks like it's from 1933. Like, I feel like we would have found it by now. So I really, much as I love the legend, I just really do not think that Nessie is real.
Yeah, sadly, I do have to echo a lot of that. I mean, would I like to go to Loch Ness sometime? Sure. I mean, just from the research I've done today and the photos I've seen of the area, it does look just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Would I go on the tour and like to the museum and the gift shop? Probably, because it's part of the experience,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that. Um, do I think there's
This is
anything?
just sounding like a trip we need to put together.
Oh, I would love that. And I bet
Latvia, sponsor our trip.
coming to you live from Loch Ness. Let's see what we can find.
We will take
Um,
care of your Putin problem. I didn't say that. That's fine.
oh, but no. But do I really believe that there's anything there? Sadly, no. Um, it's a cool idea. It's fun, but it's I don't think it's any more real than the Kelpies. The mythical, the folklore creatures that kind of predated all of this in the first place. So
Which could be another answer for what they are. If we start going the magic route, can't disprove that. So,
Kelpie is just, if anyone's curious, they were, as the name suggests, water horses, but they could shape change into the shape of people. They were known for going out amongst, villages, human society, coaxing people back to the water where they would drown, dismember, and eat them. So if you're curious what a Kelpie was, there's your extra little bit of mystery and folklore for the day.
that sounds like a better case. We should have did that instead. Boy. On my end, if you're finished, Justin, don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
for it.
I just have a couple sentences here. On my end, one of the there's like this. I don't even know. I guess the Bigfoot community has it too, and those are maybe the two that, like I said, are like the most famous here. But there's this very small knit of the best, quote unquote, I'll call them experts, or people who at least at the minimum have devoted their life to this topic. And those people are always so interesting to me just to see somebody spend 40 years of their life talking about something that probably doesn't exist. Maybe they want it to exist or whatnot. And I hooked on this guy, Bob Rhines, who was one of these three people, along with maybe like Adrian Shine and Robert Feltham, maybe are the other two names on here. This guy is the one that had, I think he took he was the guy that took the flipper photo, Justin, that you shared earlier. And he had that second
Hmm.
photo, which looked to be like some sort of creature with a long neck that was basically, I don't know if it was a sonar photo. It was an underwater picture, I think, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but what strikes me with these guys is so interesting, and this guy in particular I'm thinking about is, he takes this photograph and he's not a nobody. Like these guys that are in charge of the hardcore Nessie research, they're not nobodies. Like this guy was a professor and student and scientist at MIT. He owns over 80 patents for sonar. Like this
Whoa.
guy's the real deal. Like he knows his underwater stuff and believes that he took these photos of this thing and spent over 40 years of his life studying Loch Ness whenever he could get there to go study all of this. Um, and that's just really interesting to me. His picture of the full body one, not the fin, but the full body one, has been analyzed several times and has never been proven fake, or altered or anything else. So, for that reason alone, I hold out hope that maybe there's something we're missing here, and there's always that sliver of a chance there's something else cool out there. But it's interesting to me, like this guy had any doubts about this, and he's obviously a science person because of his background and all of the things he's improved about sonar. Like, what brought him back out there for 40 years? He literally had nothing to prove to go to this place and spend all this time on this thing. And I don't think he was making money off it per se that I can tell. And I know people get obsessed with things and they definitely, devote way too much time to these crazy endeavors that they get their mind wrapped around. But he seems like a pretty normal guy that's very grounded and just was trying to apply the science to finding this thing that he really thought was out there and thought that he snapped photos of years ago. So people like that are just interesting to me to think, I don't know, like in his mind, he thinks it's there. You know what I mean? And he spent 40
Yeah.
years. Like, what have I spent 40 years dedicated to in my life? I
This
mean, sure,
podcast.
toys and knows the
Yeah.
answer, I guess, but there we go. So those people are interesting to me. But anyway, I
You guys,
digress. Let's
I,
get to the end of this puppy.
Yeah, just a quick aside, that sounds like living the dream. Like if I could
it's true.
just not
That's
work,
true.
quit my job and spend the next 40 years studying the Paulding Light or something, I'd be fine with that. That sounds amazing.
Interesting you say that. One of the clips I watched on YouTube was like an 11-minute clip from like the Today Show or like a 5-minute clip from the Today Show. And they were doing a report on something over there. And they also found that they had a job opening and it was called like, it had some title like Master Monster something or other or something crazy. And the job was basically to help coordinate a little bit, just a little bit of the research. But your main duty was to take people out on the lock and tell them entertaining tales and make it believable for the people
That sounds
basically while they were
amazing.
there. And that's what they're saying on the Today Show. They're like, and it didn't pay a lot, it'd be like $300 a day or something. But like you're on the ocean, on the lake all day long in beautiful weather. And like it just sounded beautiful.
Well,
Not,
gents,
not a
I'm
bad
moving
summer
to
gig.
Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That
You
sounds good to
guys,
me.
I just realized what we need to have happen.
Yeah.
Somehow we need to get James Cameron to be interested in the Loch Ness Monster.
So he stops making Avatar movies. I like
Like
it.
he
That
will, I
too.
mean, he will plumb every depth of that lake until he gets the
Yes,
answer.
Yeah.
that's a great idea. All those Avatar billions going to something else.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love it. That's
I
a
do
great
too.
idea. All right, you get on that and keep us updated.
All right.
Sounds good. All right, I think that's it for us here tonight on Fawn Pod. Friends occasionally not disagreeing. I'm Cody. That's Joe. That's Justin. We've had fun talking about the Loch Ness Monster tonight. We will see you
Yeah.
next week with a little tribute. A little tribute. Let's just say that as a little teaser there. So,
All aboard.
woo, just kidding.
Oh.
Um,
Bye.
Bye.
bye.